Hey, what's going on, guys? Welcome back to the channel and thank you for clicking on today's video. So in today's video, I want to cover all the best photo settings that I personally use for the Canon EOS R. This is what I found to personally be the best settings for myself and what I use this camera for. And I think some people can find some value out of that. Also, I do want to mention that I'm dropping a video very similar to this, but talking about all the best video settings on the EOS R. So be sure to be on the lookout for that. So even if you aren't using this camera specifically, I think you'll still be able to find some value out of this because a lot of this information is going to carry over to a bunch of different cameras. So let's go ahead and just jump right into it. Okay guys, so let me just quickly take you through all my settings that I use for photos. And again, this is pretty general, but I just wanted to kind of share with you guys what my settings are and what works best for me most of the time. So let's just go ahead and take a look here. If you aren't seeing the same thing as I am, just go ahead and hit info a few times. It kind of cycles through all these different things, and then you should eventually get here. You'll then hit your Q button here, kind of pull up this menu that you can then select all these things right here. So let's just start at the top. The autofocus, most all the time when I'm shooting on this camera, I'm gonna have it on that second option, the 1-point autofocus. So whenever it comes time to shooting a photo, that's just going to make sure that that single point is in focus. So I just go ahead and click on whatever it is I wanna be in focus. So that way, whenever I'm taking a photo, I can just click on what I want to be in focus. Maybe it's a product, maybe it's a person, maybe it's somebody's hand, whatever it is, it just makes sure that that is in focus. Quick tip, you hit this little trash can and it will put it back in the center, which is super handy. The only other thing I really ever use is maybe the face tracking if I'm shooting somebody that's modeling for me or whatever it is, but most of the time it's going to just be on 1-point autofocus. Honestly, even if it's a person most of the time. Moving on, one shot versus servo. I usually have it on one shot because most of the time, again, I'm shooting either products or landscapes, whatever it is. So if you have it on one shot, if you hold down that shutter halfway down, it will have that in focus. You can then kind of readjust your shot and it just keeps that point in focus where you were. If you change it over to servo, basically if you hold down that shutter halfway, it's going to keep focusing the entire time wherever you are moving that point. So that's super handy if maybe you're shooting like an athlete or someone playing football or someone running, whatever it is, and you want to make sure that way if maybe you are trying to keep that person in focus while they're moving, that kind of helps you out kind of keeping that person in focus. But for me, most of the time I'm just going to be in one shot. That works best for me. Moving on down the line here, when it comes time to drive mode, I usually have it on low continuous. That just works best for me. If I'm doing something like trying to take a thumbnail for myself or something like that, I will then kind of put on a self timer and allow myself to kind of get framed up, and then it takes the shot for me. The high speed continuous is just too high for what I need to do most of the time. Again, that's going to be for like a sports photographer or something like that. Single shooting is fine. That's just if you're trying to take one shot at a time and you're not worried about capturing a movement or anything like that. But low continuous is kind of like the best of both worlds in my opinion, and it's quick enough for me. It sounds like this. So pretty quick, still not the fastest, but quick enough for what I need to. High speed is definitely way quicker, so that again would be like for sports photography or something like that. So you guys can hear that's way quicker, way more than what I need most of the time. And these files can get big, so I try not to shoot way too many photos that I don't need, but yeah, for most of the time for me, it's gonna be single shooting or low continuous. The metering mode, I just have it set to I think what it just came defaulted as, but I don't really worry about this too much. That's just going to show you on the light meter down here kind of what it's recommending where you're at. I kind of just trust my eye more, honestly, so I kind of just go off of that. The anti-flicker shoot, I wouldn't really worry about that. I just kind of leave that off. That doesn't really affect what I do too much. Image quality, I'm always gonna shoot my photos in RAW. Really, I don't know many other instances you would shoot in anything else other than RAW. Maybe if you just had to shoot thousands and thousands of photos, you could shoot in JPEGs, but shooting in RAW is just gonna give you the most flexibility when it comes time to edit your photos. It's going to let you do a whole lot of things when it comes time to edit without kind of having your photo breaking down. So always, I'm gonna shoot my photos in RAW. White balance doesn't really matter too much to me, especially since I'm shooting in RAW. Like I've said previously, most of the time I'm either shooting out in the sun or using my window natural light, or even using my aperture 120D that is already kind of set to be daylight. So shoot in whatever you want. I just have mine set to daylight since that's what I'm shooting in most of the time, but you can always just adjust that when it comes time to edit it since you are shooting in RAW. So the picture style doesn't really matter a whole lot either since you are shooting in RAW. I kind of have this custom neutral one set up if you guys want to copy it. Basically, it's just going to be a little bit more neutral, a little lower contrast, a little desaturated. I kind of just like that starting point when it comes time for me to edit my photos, but again, that's kind of just personal preference. Moving on to the auto lighting optimizer, I don't really worry about that. And then the cropping aspect ratio, I have it set to full. I'd rather just shoot the full image and then I can just crop it later on when it comes time to edit the photo. One thing I do want to touch on in the menu settings here, if you are ever shooting in manual focus, I really like on the EOS R, it kind of gives you the option to have focus peaking. So I have that on, the level set to high and the color set to red. And then I also have the focus guide on, which is this little box here. So if I switch this to manual focus, it shows you what is in focus highlighted in red. Just a nice little kind of visual there. And then that little box on the inside is that grid I was talking about, that those two arrows line up. That just helps you know what's in focus if you have to shoot in manual focus. So super handy, really like that about this camera. And just as I mentioned in the other video I put out similar to this, talking about the video settings, you can set up custom modes if you want. So if you dial in the settings you want, you can go in and set your settings to be defaulted to these different custom buttons. I really don't mind just doing everything in manual and just kind of adjusting as I go along. So that's one thing that's super nice if you are doing a lot of photos and you need some different custom settings. But for myself, I kind of just keep it on manual all the time and just kind of adjust as I need to. So kind of my baseline when it comes time to shooting photos is, because most of the time, like 99.9% of the time, I'm shooting my photos handheld, and the lowest I want my shutter speed to be if I'm holding the camera is going to be 1/160. That's just going to take out that natural handheld camera shake and stop a lot of the motion that I need to. If you are shooting moving subjects or someone running or a car, whatever it is, you can definitely bump up that shutter speed as much as you need to, but usually 160 is kind of my baseline, and then I kind of just adjust it from there. My aperture is currently at an f4.0. That's kind of just the default I use because I'm using a 16-35 f4 camera right now, so I like to just have that bokeh out background. Again, if I'm shooting something specific, I might have to change that setting, like a landscape or whatever it is, but a lot of times I'm going to be at that f4.0. So the ISO is currently set up to be 800 right now. Honestly, on this camera, you can bump that ISO up to crazy numbers, but for most of the time, for what I'm shooting, it's daytime or it's in my office or it's outside. So 800 or below is definitely fine. I think 400 is kind of the baseline for this camera, so you get the best looking image at 400. I have no problem kind of changing the ISO as much as I need to, but I definitely personally try to keep it under like 3200 if I can. But again, it's kind of specific to whatever you're shooting. So definitely just do some trial and error. But this camera is pretty forgiving. So I think that covers pretty much all the settings that I use when it comes time to taking photos on the EOS R. All right guys, so that's gonna pretty much cover all the photo settings that I use on the EOS R. And obviously this is what just works best for me and what I mainly shoot. So definitely depending on what you're shooting, things are gonna have to change a bit, but hopefully you guys were able to take some value out of this. If you guys have any questions on things that maybe I didn't cover, drop it down in the comments below and I'll be sure to respond to you guys. Be sure to be on the lookout for another video I'm dropping that's gonna be very similar to this one, but talking about the best video settings I use for this camera. But I think that's gonna be it, guys. If you enjoyed this video and you were able to take some value out of it, drop it a thumbs up. That really helps the video out. If you're new around here, consider subscribing. I'd love to have you. I'm a content creator trying to help other creators create better looking content. That is a mouthful, and my name is Johnny, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Peace.